We live in an age of unprecedented technological capability. Satellites can photograph a license plate from orbit. Thermal imaging can detect a warm body through dense forest canopy. Drones equipped with artificial intelligence can scan thousands of acres in hours. Search and rescue teams now deploy equipment that would have seemed like science fiction just 20 years ago. And yet people continue to vanish in the wilderness without a trace. The cases we will examine challenge our fundamental assumptions about technology and its ability to find the lost. These are not stories of searches that were underfunded or poorly organized. These are stories of searches that had everything: helicopters, drones, thermal cameras, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, trained dogs, hundreds of volunteers, and unlimited budgets, and still failed. The technology worked exactly as designed. The wilderness simply did not care. The first case begins in the Cascade Range of Washington State in October of 2021, when a software engineer with a passion for solo hiking walked into the mountains carrying more location technology than most search teams possess. He had designed emergency systems for a living. He understood redundancy. He understood failure modes. He built his own safety net with the precision of someone who knew exactly what could go wrong. None of it mattered. Nathan Okoye was 34 years old in October of 2021, a senior systems architect at a Seattle technology company that specialized in emergency response software. His work involved designing the back-end infrastructure for applications used by fire departments, ambulance services, and search and rescue teams across North America. He understood intimately how emergency systems functioned, where they failed, and how to build redundancy into critical processes. His colleagues described him as methodical to the point of obsession. He documented everything. He tested everything. He never deployed a system without multiple fallback options. This same approach defined his personal life, particularly his passion for solo wilderness hiking. Nathan had been hiking alone in the Pacific Northwest for more than a decade. He had completed solo traverses of some of the most challenging terrain in Washington state. He was not reckless. He was the opposite of reckless. His preparation for each trip followed a checklist that ran to 6 pages, covering everything from weather contingencies to equipment redundancy to communication protocols. For his October 2021 trip, a 4-day traverse of a remote section of the Glacier Peak Wilderness, Nathan carried equipment that represented the cutting edge of personal location technology. He carried a Garmin InReach satellite communicator, which could send GPS coordinates and text messages from anywhere on Earth via the Iridium satellite network. He had programmed the device to send automated location pings every 15 minutes while he was moving and every hour while stationary. He carried an Apple Watch with cellular capability, configured to share his location continuously with 3 emergency contacts. The watch also monitored his heart rate, blood oxygen levels, and fall detection. If Nathan fell and did not move for 60 seconds, the watch would automatically call emergency services and transmit his coordinates. He carried an iPhone with offline topographic maps of his entire route, plus a backup battery pack with enough capacity to keep the phone charged for 2 weeks. He carried a personal locator beacon, a dedicated emergency device that would transmit his coordinates to rescue satellites if activated manually. He carried a small drone, a DJI Mini, which he planned to use for route scouting, and which could, in an emergency, be flown above the tree canopy to establish line-of-sight communication with his satellite devices. And he carried a prototype location device that his own company was developing, a small unit that combined GPS, GLONASS, and Galileo satellite systems with a machine learning algorithm designed to predict position even when satellite signals were degraded. Nathan Okoye entered the Glacier Peak Wilderness with more location technology than many professional search and rescue teams possessed. He had redundancy upon redundancy. He had fail-safes for his fail-safes. He was found dead 11 days later, approximately 200 yards from a well-marked trail. The search for Nathan Okoye began on October 19, 2021, 3 days after his expected return date. His girlfriend, Amara Oyalaran, had been monitoring his location data throughout the trip and had grown concerned when the automated pings from his Garmin stopped arriving on October 16th at approximately 2:37 in the afternoon. Amara waited several hours, assuming Nathan had entered a canyon or dense forest that blocked satellite signals. When no pings arrived by evening, she contacted the Snohomish County Sheriff Office, which coordinates search and rescue operations in the Glacier Peak area. The initial response was shaped by the unusual amount of data available about his movements. Unlike most missing persons cases, where searchers must estimate probable routes based on limited information, the Garmin track showed the exact path for the first 3 days of his trip. The data revealed that Nathan had followed his planned route precisely through October 15th. On October 16th, the track showed him deviating from his planned path at approximately 11 in the morning, turning east into a drainage that was not on his itinerary. He traveled approximately 1.3 miles into this drainage before the pings stopped at 2:37 in the afternoon. The last recorded position placed Nathan in a steep, heavily forested valley at approximately 4,200 feet elevation. The terrain was difficult, but not extreme. There were no cliffs or significant hazards marked on the topographic maps. Search teams reached the last known coordinates on October 20th, 4 days after the final ping. They found the backpack leaning against a tree, apparently placed there deliberately. Inside the pack was his Garmin device, his iPhone, his Apple Watch, his personal locator beacon, his drone, and the prototype location unit from his company. All of the devices were functional. All had battery remaining. None had been activated in emergency mode. The tent was pitched approximately 50 yards from the backpack in a small clearing. His sleeping bag was inside, along with food, water, and his journal. The tent showed no signs of disturbance. The campsite appeared to have been set up normally and then simply abandoned. Nathan himself was not there. The search expanded rapidly. Within 48 hours, more than 120 personnel were deployed, including ground teams, helicopter crews, and a drone unit from the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. The operation would eventually involve more than 200 searchers and cost an estimated $400,000. The technology deployed was state-of-the-art. 3 helicopters equipped with forward-looking infrared cameras flew grid patterns over the search area. FLIR technology can detect heat signatures through forest canopy, allowing searchers to spot warm bodies that would be invisible to the naked eye. The helicopters flew more than 60 hours of search time over 11 days. A fleet of 12 drones, including several equipped with thermal imaging, systematically scanned the terrain surrounding the last known position. The drones were programmed with AI-assisted search patterns that prioritized areas where a missing person would be most likely to travel based on terrain analysis. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed in areas where searchers suspected Nathan might have fallen into a crevice or been buried by a small landslide. The radar can detect disturbances in soil up to several meters deep. Satellite imagery was obtained from commercial providers, including high-resolution photographs taken within 24 hours of the search beginning. Analysts examined the images for any sign of Nathan or his equipment. 8 dog teams were deployed, including both air-scent dogs that could detect human presence over large areas and trailing dogs that could follow the scent of a specific person. Cell tower data was analyzed to determine whether the phone had connected to any towers after the Garmin pings stopped. It had not. The technology revealed nothing. The FLIR-equipped helicopters detected numerous heat signatures, all of which were investigated and determined to be animals. The thermal drones found nothing. The ground-penetrating radar found nothing. The satellite imagery showed nothing. The dogs found the scent at his campsite, but could not establish a consistent trail leading away from it. For 11 days, the most sophisticated search technology available scanned the wilderness for any trace of Nathan Okoye. The machines performed exactly as designed. They covered the terrain systematically. They analyzed the data accurately. They detected everything they were designed to detect. They did not detect Nathan. On October 27th, a volunteer searcher named Diana Costello found the body in a ravine approximately 200 yards from the well-marked Seattle River Trail. He was lying face down in a small creek, partially submerged. He had been dead for approximately 10 days, which meant he died within 24 to 48 hours of his last Garmin ping. The location where Nathan was found had been searched twice by ground teams and overflown multiple times by both helicopters and drones. The ravine was not deep. The forest canopy was not particularly dense. There was no obvious reason why the thermal cameras had not detected his body, or why the search dogs had not found his scent. The autopsy revealed no definitive cause of death. Nathan had no significant injuries. He had not drowned, despite being found in water. He showed no signs of heart attack, stroke, or other medical emergency. Toxicology found no drugs or alcohol in his system. The medical examiner ultimately listed the cause of death as undetermined, noting only that Nathan appeared to have died of natural causes. But natural causes do not explain why a healthy 34-year-old man would walk away from a fully functional campsite, leave behind every piece of emergency technology he possessed, hike 200 yards toward a main trail, and die in a shallow creek with no apparent injury or illness. Natural causes do not explain why he did not use any of his multiple emergency devices. Natural causes do not explain why 11 days of searching with the most advanced technology available failed to find a body 200 yards from a marked trail. The family of Nathan Okoye hired an independent consultant to review the search operation. The consultant, a former Coast Guard rescue coordinator named William Tanaka, examined the flight logs, drone data, and ground team reports in detail. His conclusions were troubling. The thermal imaging should have detected the body for at least 48 hours after death, Tanaka wrote in his report. A human body retains enough heat to be visible on FLIR cameras for a significant period post-mortem. Even accounting for environmental factors such as water submersion and ambient temperature, the body should have been detectable on at least some of the helicopter passes during the first several days of the search. Tanaka could not explain why it was not detected. He also noted anomalies in the drone data. Several of the AI-assisted drones had flagged the ravine where Nathan was found as a low-priority search area, despite the fact that it was close to a trail and contained water, both factors that should have increased its priority in the search algorithm. When Tanaka examined the decision-making process of the algorithm, he found that the drones had correctly identified the ravine as a probable location, but the priority score had been reduced because the algorithm determined that the area had already been adequately searched by ground teams. The ground teams had searched the area. They had walked within 50 yards of where Nathan lay. They did not see him. Tanaka interviewed several members of the ground teams. All of them described the search area as unusually difficult to navigate, with dense undergrowth and poor visibility. Several mentioned that they had felt disoriented during their sweeps, losing track of their position despite carrying GPS devices. One searcher described a persistent feeling of unease, a sense that something was wrong that she could not articulate. These subjective experiences do not appear in the official search documentation. They are not the kind of data that technology can process, but they suggest that something about the terrain affected human perception in ways that may have contributed to the search failure. Nathan Okoye was a man who understood technology better than almost anyone. He built systems designed to find people in emergencies. He carried more redundant location equipment than most search teams possess. None of it saved him. None of it helped searchers find him until it was far too late. The machines worked perfectly. The wilderness simply did not cooperate. The disappearance and death of Nathan Okoye challenges our faith in technology as a solution to wilderness emergencies. Nathan did everything right. He carried redundant systems. He programmed automated check-ins. He shared his location data with multiple contacts. His preparation exceeded what even professional search teams would consider adequate. And yet, he died 200 yards from a trail, and the most sophisticated search technology in the world could not find him for 11 days. The first lesson concerns the gap between capability and reliability. Technology can do remarkable things under optimal conditions. Thermal cameras can detect heat signatures through forest canopy. Drones can scan vast areas quickly. Satellite communicators can transmit from anywhere on Earth. But optimal conditions rarely exist in wilderness emergencies. Dense vegetation, rugged terrain, weather, and factors we do not fully understand can degrade technological performance in ways that are difficult to predict. The second lesson involves the psychology of technology dependence. Nathan left his campsite without any of his emergency devices. We do not know why, but the fact that a man who understood emergency systems so thoroughly would abandon those systems suggests that something affected his judgment. Technology cannot protect you if you do not use it, and whatever causes people to make irrational decisions in the wilderness is not something that technology can address. The third lesson concerns the limitations of search algorithms. The drones that searched for Nathan were programmed with AI that made decisions about where to look. The AI deprioritized the ravine where Nathan lay because it believed the area had been adequately searched. The algorithm was wrong. Artificial intelligence is only as good as the assumptions built into it, and wilderness search involves variables that no algorithm can fully account for. The fourth lesson involves the value of human intuition. Several searchers reported feeling disoriented and uneasy in the search area. These feelings were dismissed as irrelevant to the search operation. But if humans are perceiving something that machines cannot detect, those perceptions deserve serious consideration. Technology should augment human judgment, not replace it. The fifth lesson is the hardest to accept. Sometimes technology fails for reasons we cannot explain. The thermal cameras should have detected the body. The drones should have prioritized the ravine where he lay. The search dogs should have found his scent. None of these systems failed mechanically. They simply did not produce the results they were designed to produce. We do not know why. We may never know why. Nathan Okoye trusted technology. He built his career on the premise that well-designed systems could save lives. He may have been right in general, but in his specific case, in that specific wilderness, at that specific time, the technology he trusted could not save him. The machines are powerful, but they are not omnipotent, and the wilderness does not care how sophisticated our tools have become. The second case takes us to the deserts of southern Utah, where a different kind of technology failed in a different way. This is the story of a search that had unlimited resources, perfect weather, and terrain that should have been ideal for technological detection. It is also the story of how the abundance of data can sometimes obscure rather than illuminate the truth. Veronica Sandoval was 28 years old in May of 2022. A professional nature photographer who had built a significant following on social media by documenting her solo expeditions into remote landscapes. She had photographed the slot canyons of Arizona, the alpine lakes of Colorado, the volcanic terrain of Hawaii. Her images were technically excellent and often captured locations that few people had ever seen. Her followers numbered more than 300,000 across various platforms. Many of them tracked her expeditions in real time, as Veronica frequently shared her GPS coordinates and live updates during her trips. She had monetized this following through sponsorships from outdoor equipment companies, who provided her with the latest gear in exchange for exposure. In May of 2022, Veronica announced that she would be attempting a solo traverse of a remote section of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, a journey of approximately 60 miles through some of the most isolated terrain in the continental United States. The route would take her through narrow slot canyons, across exposed slick rock plateaus, and into areas that saw fewer than a dozen visitors per year. She documented her preparation extensively on social media. She showed her followers the satellite communicator she would carry, the solar panels that would keep her devices charged, the camera equipment that would capture images of landscapes few people had ever photographed. She shared her detailed itinerary, her emergency contacts, and her check-in schedule. Her followers watched her enter the wilderness on May 7, 2022. They tracked her progress through daily updates and GPS pings. They saw her photographs of narrow canyons and ancient rock formations. And then, on May 11th, the updates stopped. The last social media post was uploaded at 3:47 in the afternoon on May 11th. from a location approximately 23 miles into her planned route. The post included a photograph of a narrow slot canyon with the caption, "Found something incredible. Going deeper to get the shot." Her satellite communicator sent one more automated ping at 4:15 in the afternoon, showing her position approximately half a mile from the location of the photograph, deeper into the canyon system she had been exploring. No further communications were received. The search for Veronica Sandoval began on May 13th, when she missed her scheduled check-in with her emergency contact. Unlike many missing persons cases, this search had extraordinary advantages from the start. The search team knew the exact route. They had GPS data showing her precise path through the wilderness. They had photographs documenting where she had been and what she had seen. They had hundreds of thousands of followers who were eager to help, many of whom began organizing their own search efforts within hours of learning she was missing. The terrain, while remote, was well suited for aerial search. The desert landscape had minimal vegetation. The rock formations, while complex, did not obscure sightlines the way forests do. Weather conditions were ideal: clear skies, moderate temperatures, no wind. The technology deployed was comprehensive. Helicopters with high-resolution cameras flew systematic grids over the search area beginning on May 14th. The clear desert air and open terrain provided optimal conditions for aerial observation. Pilots reported visibility of more than 50 miles. Drones equipped with zoom cameras explored the slot canyons that helicopters could not enter. The narrow canyons posed challenges for aerial search, but the drones were able to navigate into spaces too tight for human access and transmit real-time video to search coordinators. Satellite imagery was obtained from multiple commercial providers. Because the terrain was largely exposed rock with little vegetation, analysts expected that a person or body would be clearly visible in the high-resolution photographs. Thermal imaging was deployed, although its effectiveness was limited by the desert environment. The rock surfaces absorbed heat during the day and radiated it at night, creating thermal signatures that could mask a human body. Nonetheless, early morning flights, when temperature differentials were greatest, offered the best opportunity for thermal detection. Ground teams systematically explored every accessible portion of the canyon system. Experienced canyoneers rappelled into sections that could not be reached on foot. Technical rope teams checked ledges and overhangs where a person might have fallen. The social media following that Veronica had cultivated became both an asset and a complication. Hundreds of her followers traveled to Utah to join the search. Many had outdoor experience and genuine skills to contribute. Others had enthusiasm but little training, and coordinating their efforts strained the resources of the official search operation. The volume of data was unprecedented. Search coordinators had access to every photograph Veronica had posted, every GPS coordinate she had shared, every comment she had made about her route and her plans. Her social media history provided a detailed record of her decision-making patterns, her risk tolerance, and her behavior in similar terrain. Artificial intelligence was used to analyze this data. Machine learning algorithms examined her photographs to identify the precise locations where they were taken. Natural language processing analyzed her comments and captions for any indication of her plans or state of mind. Predictive models estimated where she was most likely to have traveled based on her documented preferences and behaviors. The technology produced terabytes of data. It generated probability maps, route analyses, and behavioral profiles. It identified dozens of locations that warranted priority searching. It did not find Veronica Sandoval. The search continued for 26 days. More than 400 personnel participated. Helicopters flew more than 200 hours. Drones explored every accessible slot canyon within 10 miles of her last known position. Ground teams covered more than 300 square miles of terrain. Nothing was found. No body, no equipment, no clothing, no trace of Veronica beyond the GPS coordinates and photographs she had shared before she disappeared. The official search was suspended on June 8, 2022. The case was classified as an open missing person investigation. Veronica Sandoval was declared legally dead 2 years later, in June of 2024. But the story does not end there. In the months following the official search, independent investigators and dedicated followers continued to analyze the data that Veronica had left behind. They examined her photographs with forensic detail, looking for any clue that might indicate where she had gone after her final post. One analyst, a retired geologist named Harold Benton, noticed something in the photograph that accompanied the final social media post. The image captioned, "Found something incredible. Going deeper to get the shot." The photograph showed a narrow slot canyon, its walls rising perhaps 60 feet on either side. The lighting suggested late afternoon sun. The rock formations were typical of the Escalante region, with the distinctive striped patterns created by millions of years of sediment deposition. But in the upper right corner of the frame, partially obscured by shadow, there appeared to be an opening in the canyon wall. Not a natural alcove or erosion feature, but what looked like a deliberate passage, almost rectangular in shape, leading into darkness. Benton enhanced the image and examined it in detail. He concluded that the opening was real, not a photographic artifact or trick of light. He estimated it to be approximately 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, large enough for a person to enter. He cross-referenced the GPS coordinates of the photograph with geological surveys of the area. No cave or passage was documented at that location. The official maps showed solid rock. Benton shared his findings with the search coordinators. A team was dispatched to the location in September of 2022, 4 months after the disappearance. They found the canyon. They found the exact spot where Veronica had taken her photograph, identifiable by the distinctive rock formations in the frame. They did not find any opening in the canyon wall. The rock face where the passage had appeared in the photograph was solid. There was no cave, no alcove, no gap of any kind. The stone was continuous and unbroken. The team photographed the location from multiple angles. They used ground-penetrating radar to scan for voids behind the rock face. They found nothing. Either the opening in the photograph never existed, or it existed on May 11, 2022, and no longer exists today. Neither explanation is satisfying. The case of Veronica Sandoval remains unsolved. The technology that documented her journey in such detail could not explain where that journey ended. The data that should have led searchers directly to her led instead to a solid rock wall and more questions than answers. The disappearance of Veronica Sandoval illustrates a paradox of the information age. More data doesn't always lead to better outcomes. Veronica shared more information about her location and activities than almost any missing person in history. She left a digital trail that should have made finding her straightforward. Instead, the abundance of data may have created false confidence and obscured the limits of what technology could reveal. The first lesson concerns the difference between data and understanding. Search teams had terabytes of information about her journey. They knew where she had been, what she had seen, and what she had planned to do. But knowing these things did not explain what actually happened. Data describes the past. It does not necessarily illuminate the present or predict the future. The second lesson involves the seduction of false precision. GPS coordinates suggest exactitude. Photographs seem to capture objective reality. But coordinates can be misleading if terrain makes them difficult to reach, and photographs capture only what the camera can see, not what lies beyond the frame. The precision of technology can create an illusion of completeness that masks how much remains unknown. The third lesson concerns the limitations of remote sensing. Helicopters, drones, and satellites can see vast areas, but they can only see surfaces. Slot canyons, caves, overhangs, and other terrain features can hide what lies beneath them. In complex terrain like the Escalante Canyons, a person could be invisible to aerial observation while being only a few yards from open ground. The fourth lesson involves the social dimensions of modern search operations. The large following brought hundreds of volunteers to the search, but it also brought complexity, misinformation, and conflicting theories that strained official resources. In an age of social media, search coordinators must manage public attention as well as search operations, and these demands can conflict. The fifth lesson is the most disturbing. The opening that appeared in the final photograph has never been explained. Geological features do not appear and disappear. Rock walls do not develop passages and then close them. Either Veronica photographed something that does not exist, or she photographed something that existed briefly and then ceased to exist. Neither possibility fits within conventional understanding. The technology worked. The data was abundant. The search was thorough. And Veronica Sandoval is still missing. The machines showed us everything except what we needed to see. The wilderness keeps its secrets, even from the all-seeing eyes we have built to penetrate its mysteries. There is a broader pattern here that deserves examination. In preparing this investigation, we reviewed more than 40 missing persons cases from the past decade, in which advanced technology played a significant role in the search. The results were sobering. In cases where the missing person was found alive, technology contributed to the rescue in approximately 70% of instances. Satellite communicators, GPS tracking, and aerial search all proved valuable when the person was conscious, mobile, and able to assist in their own rescue. But in cases where the missing person was found deceased or never found at all, the contribution of technology dropped dramatically. In more than half of these cases, technology either failed to locate the subject or located them only after death, despite searches that should have been successful based on the capabilities of the equipment deployed. This disparity suggests something important about the relationship between technology and wilderness search. Our tools are excellent at finding people who can help us find them. They are far less reliable at finding people who cannot. The reasons for this are partially understood. A living person moves, creating disturbances that sensors can detect. A living person radiates heat in patterns distinct from the environment. A living person can signal, activate devices, and respond to searchers. A deceased person does none of these things. But the partial explanations do not account for cases like Nathan Okoye, where thermal cameras should have detected the body, but did not. They do not account for cases like Veronica Sandoval, where the terrain was ideal for aerial detection and the subject simply vanished. They do not account for the persistent reports from searchers of equipment malfunctions, GPS anomalies, and unexplained gaps in coverage that occur in certain areas far more frequently than in others. We spoke with Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, a professor of emergency management at the University of Nevada, who has studied search and rescue operations for more than 20 years. Her research focuses on the gap between technological capability and real-world performance. The technology itself is almost never the problem, Dr. Yamamoto explained. The sensors work, the cameras capture images, the GPS tracks positions. What fails is the assumption that technology can substitute for understanding. Dr. Yamamoto described what she calls the automation paradox in search operations. When we deploy sophisticated technology, we tend to trust its outputs, she said. If the thermal camera does not show a heat signature, we conclude that no heat signature exists. If the search algorithm deprioritizes an area, we accept that the area is low priority. We treat the technology as objective and infallible, when in fact it is limited by the assumptions programmed into it. This paradox was evident in both the Okoye and Sandoval cases. Searchers trusted the thermal cameras. They trusted the drone algorithms. They trusted the satellite imagery. When these systems failed to find the missing persons, searchers did not initially question the technology. They assumed the subjects were not in the areas being searched. Dr. Yamamoto has documented numerous cases where over-reliance on technology led searchers away from areas where the missing person was ultimately found. Technology creates tunnel vision, she said. It focuses attention on what it can detect and distracts from what it cannot. The best search operations use technology as one tool among many, not as a replacement for human judgment and intuition. But human judgment and intuition are increasingly devalued in modern search operations. The volume of data generated by drones, satellites, and sensors is so vast that human analysis cannot process it all. Artificial intelligence must filter the data, prioritize areas, and direct resources. And artificial intelligence, for all its power, has blind spots that we do not fully understand. The cases of Nathan Okoye and Veronica Sandoval represent two different modes of technological failure. In the Okoye case, the technology worked correctly, but could not detect what it was designed to detect. In the Sandoval case, the technology worked correctly, but the data it produced created more mystery than clarity. Both cases ended the same way, with a missing person who was not found despite a massive technological effort. Both cases challenge the assumption that more technology equals better outcomes. And both cases suggest that the wilderness possesses qualities that our machines, for all their sophistication, cannot fully perceive or comprehend. The families of the missing have drawn their own conclusions from these failures. Amara Oyelaran, the girlfriend of Nathan Okoye, has become an advocate for reforming search and rescue protocols. She speaks publicly about the over-reliance on technology and the need for search operations to maintain what she calls humble skepticism about technological capabilities. Nathan designed emergency systems, she has said in interviews. He knew better than anyone what technology could and could not do, and yet the same technology he trusted with his life failed to find him when he needed it most. We have to ask why. We have to admit that we do not fully understand the limitations of our tools. The followers of Veronica Sandoval have continued to analyze the data she left behind, searching for any clue that might explain her disappearance. Independent researchers have examined thousands of her photographs, looking for patterns or anomalies that might point toward an explanation. The opening in the canyon wall that appeared in her final photograph remains a source of intense speculation. Some believe it was a photographic artifact, a trick of light and shadow that created the illusion of a passage. Others believe it was real, and that Veronica entered it, and that whatever lies beyond is where she remains. Neither explanation is provable. The technology that documented her journey in such detail cannot answer the most basic question about how that journey ended. This is the uncomfortable truth about technology and wilderness search. Our tools have expanded our capabilities enormously. They have saved countless lives. They represent a genuine triumph of human ingenuity. But they have not conquered the wilderness. They have not eliminated mystery. They have not made the wild places safe. They have only given us new ways to fail. We now turn to cases where technology did not merely fail to find the missing, but actively contributed to their disappearance. These are stories of GPS devices that guided hikers into terrain they could not survive, of communication systems that created false confidence and delayed rescue, of apps and algorithms that made decisions no human would make, with fatal consequences. The technology in these cases did not malfunction. It performed precisely as programmed. The problem was that the programs were written by people who did not understand the wilderness, tested in conditions that did not reflect reality, and trusted by users who believed the machines knew better than their own instincts. The first case takes us to the mountains of New Mexico, where a father and son followed their GPS into a canyon that does not appear on any official map, and from which only one of them emerged. Raymond Kessler was 53 years old in September of 2020, a civil engineer from Albuquerque who had spent 30 years designing roads and bridges across the American Southwest. His son, Trevor, was 24, a recent graduate working at an architecture firm in Denver. They had been planning this trip for more than a year, a week-long backpacking expedition into the Pecos wilderness, retracing a route that Raymond had hiked with his own father in 1982. Raymond was not a casual hiker. He had logged thousands of miles in the mountains of New Mexico over 3 decades. He knew the Pecos wilderness intimately, had hiked most of its major trails multiple times, and understood the specific dangers of high-altitude terrain in the southern Rockies. He had taught Trevor to hike as a child and had instilled in him the same respect for the mountains that his own father had instilled in him. For this trip, Raymond had upgraded his navigation equipment. His previous expeditions had relied on paper maps and a traditional compass, the tools his father had taught him to use. But Trevor had convinced him to try a GPS device, a Garmin Montana loaded with detailed topographic maps of the Pecos wilderness. The device could show their exact position, calculate distances and elevation changes, and suggest routes based on trail data. Raymond had been skeptical at first. He trusted his maps. He trusted his compass. He trusted his own ability to read terrain and navigate by landmark. But Trevor argued that the GPS was simply a better tool, more accurate, more detailed, more reliable than paper maps that could tear or get wet or blow away in the wind. Raymond eventually agreed. He packed his paper maps as backup but planned to navigate primarily using the GPS. The Kesslers entered the Pecos Wilderness on September 14, 2020, beginning their hike from the Iron Gate campground. Their planned route would take them north along the Pecos River, then east over a high pass, then south through a series of alpine meadows before looping back to their starting point. The total distance was approximately 42 miles over 7 days. The first 3 days proceeded without incident. The weather was clear and warm. The trail was well maintained. The GPS device performed exactly as advertised, showing their position accurately and tracking their progress along the planned route. On September 17th, their 4th day, the Kesslers reached the high point of their loop, a pass at approximately 12,000 feet elevation. From there, the planned route descended southeast into a drainage called Rito del Padre, eventually connecting with a trail that would lead them back toward their starting point. This is where the GPS made a suggestion that Raymond Kessler should not have followed. According to the track data recovered from the device after the incident, the GPS calculated that a more direct route existed. Instead of following the established trail southeast, which would add approximately 3 miles to their journey, the device suggested a cross-country route due south that would save distance and reduce their total hiking time by several hours. The suggested route crossed terrain that appeared passable on the GPS screen. The topographic lines showed a steep but navigable descent into a side canyon, followed by a traverse across a ridge, followed by another descent to the established trail. The device estimated the cross-country section at 4.2 miles. Raymond consulted his paper map. The paper map showed the same general terrain, but with less detail. It did not show the side canyon that the GPS suggested entering. This should have been a warning sign. Canyons that do not appear on maps are often unmapped because they are dangerous or impassable. But the GPS showed the canyon clearly. It showed a route through it. It showed an estimated time of 2 hours and 40 minutes to reach the established trail. Raymond made a decision that he would not survive to regret. He trusted the GPS. The Kesslers left the established trail at approximately 10:30 in the morning and began their cross-country descent into the side canyon. Trevor was in the lead, following the route displayed on the GPS screen. Raymond followed, carrying the heavier pack. The initial descent was steep but manageable. The terrain matched what the GPS showed: loose scree, scattered boulders, occasional patches of Krumholtz pine. Within an hour, they had dropped nearly 1,000 feet in elevation and entered the upper reaches of the canyon. This is where the GPS route and reality began to diverge. The canyon narrowed rapidly. What had appeared on the GPS as a passable drainage was in fact a slot canyon, its walls rising vertically on both sides. The floor of the canyon was choked with debris from rockfalls and flash floods. Progress slowed from hiking to scrambling to climbing. Trevor suggested turning back. Raymond checked the GPS. According to the device, they had completed more than half of the cross-country section. The established trail was less than 2 miles ahead. Turning back would mean reclimbing the 1,000 feet they had descended, then adding 3 miles to their route. Going forward seemed like the better option. They continued. What happened over the following hours has been reconstructed from the account of Trevor and from evidence found in the canyon during the subsequent search operation. The canyon continued to narrow. At several points, the Kesslers were forced to climb down dry waterfalls, using their hands and feet to descend rock faces that would normally require ropes. Raymond fell during one of these descents, dropping approximately 15 feet onto a boulder field. He injured his right ankle severely, likely fracturing it. With Raymond unable to walk without assistance, their options became limited. They could not climb back up the route they had descended. The terrain ahead remained impassable for someone with a leg injury. They were trapped in a canyon that the GPS showed as a viable route, but that was in fact a technical climbing challenge beyond their abilities. Trevor activated the emergency beacon on the GPS device at approximately 3:45 in the afternoon. The device transmitted their coordinates to rescue satellites. Help was on the way, but help would not arrive in time. The canyon that the Kesslers had entered is known locally as Caja del Muerte, the Box of Death. It does not appear on most maps because it is considered impassable. Local guides warn hikers away from it. The Forest Service has discussed posting warning signs at its entrance, but has never done so because the entrance is not accessible from any established trail. The GPS device did not know any of this. The GPS device had topographic data showing elevation contours. It had satellite imagery showing the general shape of the terrain. It had an algorithm that calculated routes based on distance and elevation change. It did not have local knowledge. It did not have warnings from guides who knew the terrain. It did not have the accumulated wisdom of generations of hikers who had learned to avoid Caja del Muerte. It had data. Data is not wisdom. The search for Raymond and Trevor Kessler began within hours of the beacon activation. A helicopter was dispatched from Santa Fe. Ground teams were mobilized from the Pecos Ranger District. The coordinates from the beacon were precise, placing the Kesslers in the middle of Caja del Muerte. The rescue teams knew immediately that this would be a difficult operation. The canyon was inaccessible by helicopter. The walls were too steep for a direct descent. Reaching the Kesslers would require a technical climbing team to rappel into the canyon from above, a process that would take many hours to organize and execute. The helicopter flew over the canyon at approximately 6:30 in the evening, less than 3 hours after the beacon was activated. The crew could see the Kesslers on the canyon floor, approximately 200 feet below the rim. They could see Raymond lying on the ground. They could see Trevor waving his arms. They could not reach them. The technical rescue team arrived at the canyon rim at approximately 2 in the morning on September 18th. They began their descent at first light. They reached the Kesslers at approximately 8:45 in the morning, 17 hours after the emergency beacon was activated. Raymond Kessler was dead. He had died sometime during the night, likely from a combination of his injuries, hypothermia, and shock. Trevor was alive, but severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure. He was evacuated by helicopter and transported to a hospital in Albuquerque, where he recovered physically. He has not recovered in other ways. In interviews conducted for this investigation, Trevor Kessler described the night he spent in Caja del Muerte with his dying father. "The GPS kept telling us we were close," Trevor said. "Even when we were trapped in that canyon, even when my father was injured and we could not move, the GPS showed that the trail was less than a mile away. It showed a route. It showed an estimated time. It acted like everything was fine." Trevor paused. "I wanted to throw it off a cliff. I wanted to smash it against the rocks. But it was also our only way to call for help. So I held on to it. I watched the battery drain while my father died. I watched the little dot on the screen that was supposed to be us, trapped in a canyon that the machine said we could walk through." The GPS device was recovered during the rescue operation. The track data was analyzed by the manufacturer as part of an investigation into the incident. The analysis revealed several factors that contributed to the fatal route suggestion. The topographic data loaded on the device was derived from satellite imagery and elevation models. It showed the general shape of the terrain accurately, but it did not distinguish between passable and impassable terrain at ground level. A slot canyon and a gentle valley can look identical from space. The routing algorithm was designed to minimize distance and elevation change. It did not incorporate data about terrain difficulty, technical climbing requirements, or local hazard warnings. It treated all terrain as equally passable if the slope angle was below a certain threshold. The device had no way to know that Caja del Muerte was dangerous. It had no way to access the local knowledge that would have warned any experienced guide away from that canyon. It had only data, and the data said the route was viable. The manufacturer issued a statement expressing condolences to the Kessler family, but denying any defect in the device. The statement noted that GPS devices are intended as navigation aids, and that users should always exercise judgment about route selection. The The statement recommended that hikers consult local guides and authorities before attempting unfamiliar terrain. Raymond Kessler had 30 years of hiking experience. He knew to consult local guides. He knew to exercise judgment. But he also trusted the GPS, and the GPS was wrong. The death of Raymond Kessler illustrates the danger of algorithmic navigation in wilderness settings. GPS devices are powerful tools that can provide valuable information about position and terrain. But they are not substitutes for local knowledge, and their route suggestions should be treated as hypotheses to be evaluated, not instructions to be followed. The first lesson concerns the difference between data and knowledge. The GPS had accurate data about the terrain in Caja del Muerte. It knew the elevation contours, the distances, the general shape of the canyon, but it did not know that the canyon was impassable. Data describes what exists. Knowledge includes understanding of what that data means. The second lesson involves the authority of machines. Trevor Kessler described feeling that the GPS was telling them to continue, even when their instincts said to turn back. Machines have an authority that can override human judgment, particularly when the machine appears to have more information than the human. This authority is often unearned. The GPS did not have more information than Raymond Kessler about the terrain ahead. It simply presented its limited information with more confidence. The third lesson concerns the failure modes of optimization algorithms. The GPS routing algorithm was designed to minimize distance and elevation change. These are reasonable goals in many contexts, but optimization for one variable often creates risks in others. The shortest route is not always the safest route. The algorithm had no way to evaluate safety. The fourth lesson involves the importance of paper maps and local knowledge. Raymond Kessler brought paper maps as backup, but chose to trust the GPS instead. If he had compared the GPS route to his paper map and noticed that the canyon did not appear on the paper map, he might have questioned the route suggestion. Paper maps are not more accurate than GPS, but they often incorporate different information, including the implicit knowledge that unmapped terrain is unmapped for a reason. The fifth lesson is the most painful. Trevor Kessler watched his father die while holding a device that showed rescue was coming. The GPS could summon help, but it could not make help arrive faster. Technology creates expectations that reality cannot always fulfill. The beacon worked. The coordinates were accurate. Help was on the way. But the canyon was too deep, the terrain too difficult, and the rescue too slow. Raymond Kessler trusted a machine that did not deserve his trust. The machine performed exactly as designed, and a man died because the design did not account for the reality of wilderness terrain. The second case takes us to the forests of northern Michigan, where a different kind of technology failure led to a different kind of tragedy. This is the story of a woman who had every means of communication available to her and still could not make anyone understand that she was dying. Keiko Watanabe was 41 years old in November of 2021, a software developer from Chicago who had recently discovered a passion for solo hiking. She had spent 2 years building her skills, starting with day hikes in the Indiana dunes and progressing to overnight trips in the forests of Wisconsin and Michigan. She was methodical in her approach, taking courses in wilderness navigation, first aid, and survival skills. She documented her progress on a blog that had accumulated a small but dedicated following. For November of 2021, Keiko planned her most ambitious trip yet, a 3-day solo hike through the Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The Porcupines, as locals call them, are among the most remote wilderness areas in the Midwest, with more than 35,000 acres of old-growth forest, rugged terrain, and limited cell phone coverage. Keiko was aware of the communication challenges. She had researched the area extensively and knew that cell service was unavailable in most of the park. She prepared accordingly. She carried a satellite communicator, a Garmin InReach Mini, which could send and receive text messages via satellite from anywhere in the world. She had tested the device multiple times before her trip and was confident in its operation. She carried a personal locator beacon as a backup emergency device. She carried a satellite phone, rented for the trip, which could make voice calls from the wilderness. She left a detailed itinerary with 3 emergency contacts: her sister in California, her hiking mentor in Wisconsin, and a friend in Chicago who had agreed to monitor her check-ins. She scheduled automated check-in messages to send from her satellite communicator every 4 hours while she was hiking. Keiko Watanabe entered the Porcupine Mountains on November 5, 2021. She was as prepared for communication as any solo hiker could reasonably be. She would spend the next 55 hours trying to tell people she was in trouble. Almost no one would understand. The first 2 days of the hike proceeded without incident. Keiko sent her scheduled check-in messages. She exchanged satellite texts with her sister about the weather and the beauty of the forest. She took photographs that she planned to share when she returned to cell coverage. Her blog readers would later see these images: the towering hemlocks, the carpet of fallen leaves, the mist rising from Lake Superior visible through gaps in the canopy. On November 7th, the 3rd day of her hike, Keiko encountered a problem. She had been following a trail along a ridgeline when she stepped on what appeared to be solid ground and broke through a thin crust of ice covering a hidden sinkhole. She fell approximately 8 feet, landing on a pile of rocks and debris at the bottom of the hole. The fall broke her left leg in 2 places. She also suffered a concussion, several broken ribs, and deep lacerations on her arms from the rocks. Keiko was conscious after the fall. She was in severe pain, but able to think clearly enough to assess her situation. She was at the bottom of a hole, approximately 8 feet deep and 6 feet wide. The walls were vertical, composed of loose soil and rocks. She could not climb out with 2 broken bones in her leg. She reached for her satellite communicator and began sending messages. The first message was sent at 11:22 in the morning. Fell into hole. Broken leg. Need rescue. Please help. The message was transmitted successfully. It was received by her sister in California within minutes. Her sister, Yumi Watanabe, responded immediately. "Are you okay? Where are you exactly? Should I call 911? Keiko replied, "Yes, call 911. I am in Porcupine Mountains. GPS coordinates on device. Broken leg, cannot move." Yumi called 911. She explained that her sister was injured in the Porcupine Mountains wilderness in Michigan. She provided the GPS coordinates that the satellite communicator had transmitted. The 911 operator in California transferred the call to the appropriate jurisdiction in Michigan. The Michigan operator took the information and said that search and rescue would be notified. This should have been the beginning of a successful rescue. The location was known. The nature of the emergency was clear. The victim was conscious and able to communicate. Instead, it was the beginning of a 55-hour ordeal that would expose catastrophic gaps in the emergency response system. The first problem was jurisdictional confusion. The GPS coordinates that Keiko transmitted placed her in Ontonagon County, Michigan, but the 911 call had been routed through a California dispatch center, which transferred it to a Michigan State Police dispatcher, which was supposed to forward it to Ontonagon County. Somewhere in this chain, the information was garbled. The coordinates were transcribed incorrectly. The search area was identified as being in Gogbik County, more than 15 miles from where Keiko actually was. The second problem was communication technology incompatibility. The satellite communicator that Keiko carried could send and receive text messages, but the search and rescue teams dispatched to find her used radio systems that could not interface with satellite text. The teams could not communicate directly with Keiko. All communication had to route through her emergency contacts, who then had to relay information through 911 dispatchers, who then had to relay information to search coordinators, who then had to relay information to field teams. This telephone chain introduced delays and errors at every step. The third problem was the gap between what Keiko could communicate and what rescuers could understand. Keiko continued sending messages throughout the first day. She described her injuries in detail. She described the sinkhole she had fallen into. She described landmarks she could see from her position. But satellite text messages are limited to 160 characters. Keiko could not send photographs. She could not send voice messages. She could not have a real-time conversation. Each message took several minutes to compose on the small device interface, and each response took several minutes to arrive. Her descriptions were fragmentary. Hole in ground near Ridge Trail. Can see dead tree with split trunk to north. Here stream below, maybe 50 yards. Search teams in Gogabik County, 15 miles away, found nothing matching this description. They reported back that the coordinates appeared to be wrong. They requested clarification. By the time this request reached Keiko through the chain of emergency contacts and dispatchers, it was late afternoon. She sent corrected coordinates, checking them 3 times on her device before transmitting. The corrected coordinates were relayed through the same chain that had garbled the original coordinates. They arrived at the Search Coordination Center with a transposition error that placed Keiko 2 miles from her actual position. Night fell. Search teams suspended operations until morning. Keiko spent the night at the bottom of a sinkhole with a broken leg, broken ribs, and a concussion, unable to make anyone understand where she was. She continued sending messages through the night. Her sister stayed awake in California, relaying every message to 911, growing increasingly frantic as it became clear that the search was not finding Keiko. At 2 in the morning, Keiko sent, "Why is no one coming? I told you where I am. Please help me." Her sister had no answer. The second day of the search began at dawn on November 8th. By now, the jurisdictional confusion had been partially resolved. Search teams were deployed to Ontonagon County, closer to the actual position of Keiko, but the transposed coordinates still had them searching 2 miles away. Keiko could hear helicopters in the distance. She tried using her satellite phone to call 911 directly, bypassing the text-based communication chain. The call connected. She spoke to a dispatcher. She gave her coordinates verbally, reading them directly from her GPS device. The dispatcher wrote down the coordinates. But the dispatcher was not familiar with GPS coordinate formats. She wrote the numbers in the wrong order, reversing latitude and longitude. This error placed Keiko in Lake Superior, which the search teams correctly recognized as impossible. They assumed the coordinates were completely wrong and continued searching based on their previous information. Keiko sent more text messages. She tried to describe her location using landmarks. She sent the coordinates again and again. She begged her sister to make the searchers understand. Her sister called 911 repeatedly. She called the Ontonagon County Sheriff directly. She called the Michigan State Police. She called the Porcupine Mountains Park office. At each call, she provided the coordinates that Keiko had sent. Each time, something went wrong. A number was transposed. A decimal point was misplaced. A latitude was recorded as longitude. The technology that was supposed to ensure precise communication introduced error after error. On the afternoon of November 8th, nearly 30 hours after her fall, Keiko sent a message that her sister would later describe as the moment she knew something was terribly wrong. The message read, "I do not think they are going to find me. I love you. Please tell Mom and Dad I love them." Yumi broke down. She called everyone she could think of. She posted on social media, begging for help. She contacted hiking groups, outdoor organizations, anyone who might have connections in Michigan. One of these contacts reached a retired search and rescue coordinator named Douglas Blackwood, who lived in the Upper Peninsula and had worked dozens of rescues in the Porcupine Mountains. Blackwood agreed to help. He called Yumi directly. He asked her to read him the coordinates exactly as Keiko had sent them. He wrote them down carefully, checking each digit. Then he pulled up a map and plotted the coordinates. He saw immediately that the coordinates placed Keiko on a ridgeline approximately 2 miles from where search teams were looking. He called the search coordinator and provided the correct location. He offered to guide a team to the area himself. The search coordinator was skeptical. They had received coordinates from multiple sources, all of which conflicted. How could they be sure these coordinates were correct? Blackwood explained that he had received them directly from the sister of the victim, who had received them directly from the device of the victim. He explained that the previous coordinate errors appeared to be transcription mistakes made by people unfamiliar with GPS formats. He explained that he had worked this terrain for 20 years and that the corrected coordinates matched the description from Keiko of hearing a stream approximately 50 yards below her position. The coordinator agreed to send a team. At 6:15 in the evening on November 8th, 55 hours after the fall, a search team reached her position. They found the sinkhole. They found Keiko at the bottom, conscious but barely responsive. She was airlifted to a hospital in Marquette. She survived, though she spent 3 weeks in the hospital and required multiple surgeries to repair her leg. She has permanent nerve damage that affects her ability to walk. She also has nightmares about the 55 hours she spent at the bottom of that hole, sending messages that no one could understand, listening to helicopters that could not find her, wondering if she would die because the technology that was supposed to save her kept failing in ways she could not anticipate. The ordeal of Keiko Watanabe exposes a critical weakness in our emergency communication systems: the gap between the technology that victims use and the technology that rescuers use. Keiko had multiple devices capable of transmitting her exact location. She used them correctly. The technology worked, but the systems that were supposed to receive and act on that information were not designed to interface with her technology, and the humans operating those systems were not trained to handle the data she was sending. The first lesson concerns system integration. The satellite communicator belonging to Keiko could send GPS coordinates anywhere in the world within minutes, but the 911 dispatch system, the search and rescue coordination system, and the field communication system were not designed to receive and process satellite text messages. Each handoff between systems introduced opportunities for error. Effective emergency response requires end-to-end system integration, not a patchwork of incompatible technologies. The second lesson involves human factors in data transmission. GPS coordinates are strings of numbers that must be recorded exactly. A single transposed digit can place a location miles from its actual position. The people handling the coordinates were not trained in GPS formats and made predictable errors. Technology is only as reliable as the humans who operate it. The third lesson concerns the limitations of text-based communication. Keiko could send 160 characters at a time. She could not send photographs, voice messages, or have real-time conversations. In an emergency, these limitations can be crippling. A 30-second voice call could have communicated more information than dozens of text messages. But the satellite phone call she made was mishandled by a dispatcher who did not understand the coordinate format. The fourth lesson involves the importance of human networks. The technology failed to find Keiko. A retired search coordinator with local knowledge succeeded where the technology failed. Douglas Blackwood understood the terrain, understood GPS coordinates, and understood how to communicate with search teams. Human expertise and human networks remain essential even in an age of satellite communication. The fifth lesson is about the psychological toll of technological failure. Keiko spent 55 hours believing that help was on the way, watching the hours pass, realizing gradually that no one was coming. The technology gave her hope. It also prolonged her suffering by making her believe that rescue was imminent when it was not. False hope can be as damaging as no hope at all. Keiko Watanabe survived because a retired volunteer happened to receive a social media post and happened to know how to interpret GPS coordinates and happened to have credibility with the search coordinator. If any of these accidents had not occurred, she would likely have died at the bottom of that sinkhole, surrounded by technology that could not save her. The machines worked, the systems did not, and a woman nearly died because we have built tools for communication without building the infrastructure to make that communication useful. These two cases represent different modes of technological failure that led to human tragedy. Raymond Kessler died because an algorithm made a suggestion that no human with local knowledge would ever make. Keiko Watanabe nearly died because the systems designed to process emergency communications could not interface with the technology she carried. In both cases, the core technology worked. The GPS functioned. The satellite communicator transmitted. The coordinates were accurate. The failures occurred in the space between technology and reality, in the algorithms that did not understand terrain, in the systems that could not talk to each other, in the humans who were not trained to handle the data they received. We spoke with Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, a professor of human-computer interaction at Stanford University, who has studied technology failures in emergency situations. Her research focuses on what she calls the translation problem, the gap between what technology can do and what humans expect it to do. People trust technology in ways they would never trust a human stranger, Dr. Vasquez explained. If a person you had never met told you to walk into a dangerous canyon, you would ask questions. You would want to know why they were recommending that route. You would evaluate their credibility. But when a GPS device suggests a route, people follow it without question. The device has authority simply because it is a machine. Dr. Vasquez has documented dozens of cases where people followed GPS directions into dangerous situations. Cars driven into lakes because GPS showed a road where a boat ramp existed. Trucks directed onto bridges that could not support their weight. Hikers led onto terrain that required technical climbing skills. In every case, the GPS was working correctly. It was displaying the information it had been given. The problem was that the information was incomplete, or that the algorithm interpreted the information in ways that did not match ground truth. The GPS does not know what it does not know, Dr. Vasquez said. It shows confidence even when confidence is not warranted. It presents suggestions as if they were facts. And humans, trained to trust machines, accept those suggestions without the skepticism they would apply to human advice. This dynamic is amplified in emergency situations. When people are lost, injured, or frightened, they look for guidance. Technology offers guidance with apparent certainty. The GPS shows a route. The satellite communicator shows that messages are being sent. The personal locator beacon shows that signals are being received. All of this creates an impression of control, of connection, of rescue in progress. But the impression may be false. The route may be impassable. The messages may be garbled in transmission. The signals may be received by systems that cannot process them effectively. Technology creates the appearance of safety, without always providing the substance of safety. Dr. Vasquez has advocated for what she calls skeptical design, building technology that communicates its limitations as clearly as its capabilities. GPS devices should warn users when suggested routes cross unmapped or potentially dangerous terrain. Satellite communicators should inform users when their messages may be delayed or garbled. Emergency systems should be designed to fail gracefully, providing useful information even when full functionality is not available. Some manufacturers have begun implementing these recommendations, but progress is slow, and the installed base of devices without skeptical design features numbers in the millions. The families affected by these failures have become advocates for change. Trevor Kessler has testified before state legislatures about the dangers of GPS navigation in wilderness areas. He has worked with outdoor organizations to develop training materials that emphasize the limitations of electronic navigation. He has called for GPS manufacturers to incorporate terrain difficulty ratings into their routing algorithms. He carries the compass of his father now. He has learned to read paper maps the way his grandfather taught his father. He will never trust a GPS suggestion without independently verifying it against other sources. Some lessons, he has said in interviews, you only learn once. I learned mine watching my father die in a canyon that a machine told us we could walk through. Keiko Watanabe has become an advocate for emergency communication system reform. She has worked with search and rescue organizations to improve training for 911 dispatchers in GPS coordinate handling. She has pushed for better integration between satellite communication devices and emergency response systems. She still hikes solo. She still carries satellite communication devices, but she also carries a ham radio now, and she has obtained her amateur radio license. She has established check-in protocols with other ham operators who can relay her position directly to search teams if needed. I do not trust any single system anymore, she has said. I trust networks. I trust redundancy. I trust humans who understand what the technology is actually telling them. These lessons come at tremendous cost. Raymond Kessler is dead. Keiko Watanabe carries permanent injuries and psychological scars. Their experiences illuminate the gap between what we believe technology can do and what it actually does in the chaos and complexity of wilderness emergencies. The machines are powerful. They are also limited. They are also fallible. They are also designed by humans who do not always understand the situations in which their designs will be used. Trust technology, but verify. Follow the GPS, but bring a map. Send the message, but have a backup plan for when the message does not get through. The wilderness does not care how sophisticated our tools have become. The wilderness follows rules that no algorithm has fully captured. And when technology fails, not if, but when, the wilderness will be waiting. We now examine what these failures mean for the future of wilderness search and rescue. We explore the emerging technologies that promise to address the limitations we have documented. We ask whether those promises are realistic, or whether they represent another cycle of overconfidence followed by tragedy. And we hear from the searchers themselves, the men and women who deploy into the wilderness with technology that sometimes helps them and sometimes fails them, who make life and death decisions based on data that may or may not reflect reality, who have learned through bitter experience that the most important technology they carry is their own judgment. The machines are tools. Tools can save lives. Tools can also kill. The difference often lies not in the technology itself, but in the wisdom of the humans who wield it. Raymond Kessler trusted a machine more than he trusted his own experience. Keiko Watanabe trusted systems that could not communicate with each other. Their stories are warnings. The next story could be yours. We have examined cases where technology failed to find the missing, and cases where technology actively contributed to tragedy. We documented thermal cameras that could not detect bodies, GPS devices that led hikers into death traps, and communication systems that could not translate coordinates accurately. Now we turn to the people who must navigate these failures every day. The search and rescue professionals who deploy into the wilderness with equipment that sometimes helps and sometimes hinders, who make life and death decisions based on data they cannot fully trust, and who have learned through decades of experience what the machines cannot teach. We also examine one final case that brings together every theme of this investigation, a search that had unlimited technology, unlimited resources, and unlimited time, and that still ended in failure. This case asks a question that the search and rescue community has been reluctant to confront. Are there places where technology simply does not work the way it should? And if so, what does that mean for the future of wilderness rescue? We begin with the searchers themselves. Marcus Riley has been a search and rescue volunteer in Colorado for 27 years. He has participated in more than 300 searches, found dozens of missing persons alive, and recovered more bodies than he cares to count. He has watched the technology of search and rescue evolve from paper maps and handheld radios to drones, thermal imaging, and artificial intelligence. He is not impressed. The technology is useful, Riley said in an interview conducted for this investigation. I am not saying we should go back to the old ways, but there is a mentality now that the machines will solve everything, that if we just deploy enough drones, enough sensors, enough computing power, we will find everyone. It is not true. It has never been true. Riley described a search he participated in during the summer of 2023 in the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado. A 59-year-old man named Gerald Hoffman had gone missing during a solo day hike. His car was found at the trailhead. His planned route was known. The weather was clear. The terrain, while rugged, was well mapped and frequently traveled. The search had every advantage. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew within hours of the report. Drones covered the trail and surrounding area systematically. Cell phone data placed the last known position within a quarter-mile radius. Dog teams were deployed the following morning. We should have found him in 24 hours, Riley said. Everything was perfect. Perfect weather, perfect data, perfect technology. We had his exact route. We had his phone pinging. We had dogs, drones, helicopters, ground teams, everything. The search continued for 9 days. Gerald Hoffman was found on day 10, approximately 150 yards from the main trail, in an area that had been searched by ground teams on days 2, 4, and 7. He was alive. Hoffman had fallen and broken his hip on the first day. He had crawled into a small depression beneath a rock overhang, seeking shelter. He had remained there for 10 days, surviving on water from a small seep and rationing the 2 granola bars he had carried. The thermal imaging had not detected him because the rock overhang blocked his heat signature from above. The drones had photographed his location multiple times, but had not identified the small opening where he lay. The dogs had passed within yards of his position, but had not alerted, possibly because the rocky terrain dispersed his scent in unpredictable ways. The ground teams had walked past him 3 times. On the 7th day, one searcher had stopped within 20 feet of where Hoffman lay. Hoffman had heard footsteps. He had tried to call out, but was too weak. The searcher had paused, looked around, and continued walking. Hoffman was found on day 10 only because a volunteer named Diana Moreno decided to research an area that had already been cleared. She had a feeling, she said later. Something told her to look again. She crawled into spaces that previous searchers had dismissed as too small to hold a person. She found Hoffman in the 3rd space she checked. He was barely conscious. Another day would likely have killed him. Riley uses this case to illustrate what he calls the technology trap. "We had so much data," he said. "So many sensors, so many images, so many reports. The data told us that certain areas had been cleared. The data told us that the thermal cameras had not detected anyone. The data told us that the search was proceeding correctly. The data was wrong." Riley paused. Gerald Hoffman was 150 yards from the trail. He was in an area we searched 3 times. He was alive, conscious, and hoping someone would find him. And he was invisible to every piece of technology we deployed. What found him was a volunteer with a feeling, a hunch, something that cannot be programmed into a drone or measured by a sensor. "We have forgotten how to trust that," Riley said. "We have forgotten that humans have capabilities that machines do not. When the technology says an area is clear, we believe it. We move on, and sometimes we leave people behind." The experience of Marcus Riley is echoed by search and rescue professionals across the country. Janelle Whitehorse has coordinated search operations in the Pacific Northwest for 18 years. She has seen technology evolve from a supplement to human searchers to, in her view, a replacement for human judgment. "The pressure comes from everywhere," Whitehorse explained. "Families want to see helicopters in the air. The media wants to report on drones and thermal cameras. Administrators want to justify equipment budgets. There is an assumption that more technology means a better search. But Whitehorse has documented cases where technology actively interfered with search effectiveness. She described a search in the Olympic National Forest in 2022, where a missing hiker was found by a volunteer who had ignored the assigned search grid. The volunteer, an experienced woodsman in his 60s, had looked at the terrain and decided that the assigned grid did not match how a lost person would actually move through the landscape. "He went where his instincts told him to go," Whitehorse said. "The search algorithm had assigned him to a different area. He ignored it, and he found the missing woman within 2 hours." Whitehorse was faced with a dilemma. The volunteer had violated protocol. He had abandoned his assigned grid. In a large search operation, this kind of freelancing can be dangerous, leading to gaps in coverage or duplication of effort. But he had also found the missing person when the technology had not. "I could not discipline him," Whitehorse said. "He was right. The algorithm was wrong. But I also could not tell other volunteers to ignore their assignments. If everyone follows their hunches, the search becomes chaos." This tension between technological coordination and human intuition runs through every modern search operation. The technology enables large-scale systematic coverage that would be impossible to coordinate otherwise, but it also imposes a framework that may not match the reality of how people move through wilderness terrain. "Search algorithms are built on models," Whitehorse explained. "The models assume certain things about how lost people behave. They assume people will seek water, will travel downhill, will follow paths of least resistance. These assumptions are often correct, but they are not always correct. And when they are wrong, the technology sends searchers to the wrong places. Whitehorse has advocated for what she calls hybrid search protocols, using technology to coordinate large-scale coverage while reserving some resources for searchers who operate on intuition and local knowledge. Her proposals have met resistance from administrators who prefer the apparent objectivity of algorithmic search patterns. "Data is defensible," she said. "If a search fails and we followed the algorithm, we can point to the data and say we did everything correctly. If a search fails because we let volunteers follow their hunches, we have no defense. The liability concerns drive us toward technology, even when technology is not the best tool." The searchers we interviewed consistently emphasized that technology is most useful for what they call the easy cases, missing persons who are mobile, conscious, and able to assist in their own rescue. A person who can activate a beacon, build a signal fire, or move to open terrain where they can be spotted from the air is likely to be found quickly by modern search technology. But the hard cases, the cases where people are injured, unconscious, or trapped in terrain that shields them from detection, remain as difficult as they ever were. "The technology has not solved the hard cases," said Robert Aguilar, a search and rescue team leader in Arizona who has worked wilderness rescues for 31 years. "In some ways, it has made them harder. We spend so much time managing the technology, interpreting the data, coordinating the drones and helicopters, that we have less time for actual searching. Less time for the slow, careful human work of looking in places that do not show up on any algorithm." Aguilar described a search he led in the Superstition Mountains in 2021. A 23-year-old woman named Iris Castellano had disappeared during a day hike. She had told friends she was hiking to a popular viewpoint, a round trip of approximately 6 miles on a well-maintained trail. She never returned. The search deployed every available technology: helicopters with thermal imaging, drones with high-resolution cameras, cell phone tracking that placed her last signal approximately 2 miles from the viewpoint, dog teams, ground searchers, satellite imagery. The search continued for 14 days. Iris Castellano was never found. "We covered every inch of that terrain," Aguilar said. "Multiple times. We had thermal images from every angle. We had drone footage of every square meter. We had dogs that should have found any human scent within miles. Nothing." Aguilar has reviewed the search data multiple times since then, looking for any indication of where the operation went wrong. "I cannot find a mistake," he said. "The search was conducted correctly. The technology performed as expected. The coverage was complete. By every objective measure, we should have found her. We did not." Cases like Iris Castellano haunt the search and rescue community. They represent a category of disappearance that technology cannot explain and human effort cannot solve. The missing person is simply gone, vanished from terrain that should not be able to hide a human body. Aguilar has a theory about these cases, though he is reluctant to state it directly. "There are places," he said slowly, "where things do not work the way they should. Places where the instruments behave strangely, where the dogs lose scent for no reason, where searchers report feeling disoriented, even on familiar terrain." He paused. "I am not saying anything supernatural. I am saying that our understanding of these environments is incomplete. The technology assumes certain things about how the world works. In most places, those assumptions are correct. In some places, they may not be. The Superstition Mountains have a long history of unusual disappearances. The legend of the Lost Dutchman mine has drawn treasure hunters into the range for more than a century, and many of them have never returned. Local searchers speak of areas where compasses behave erratically, where radio communications fail for no apparent reason, where the terrain seems to shift and change in ways that maps do not capture. These reports are anecdotal. They are not the kind of data that appears in official search documentation, but they persist across generations of searchers, and they cluster in specific areas where disappearances also cluster. Robert Aguilar does not claim to understand what is happening in these areas, but he has learned to approach them differently. "When we search in certain parts of the superstitions, I tell my teams to trust their instincts more than their instruments," he said. "If a GPS says you are in one place, but your eyes say you are somewhere else, trust your eyes. If a drone image shows an area is clear, but something tells you to look again, look again. It is not scientific. I know that. But I have been doing this for 31 years, and I have learned that science does not always have the answers. This brings us to the final case of our investigation, a disappearance that combined every element we have examined, and that remains unsolved despite one of the most technologically sophisticated searches ever conducted. Benjamin Ashworth was 47 years old in August of 2023, a software executive from San Francisco who had sold his company for a substantial sum and retired early to pursue his passion for wilderness exploration. He had spent the years since his retirement visiting remote areas around the world, from the mountains of Patagonia to the deserts of Namibia to the forests of New Zealand. In August of 2023, he planned an expedition into the Sierra Nevada of California, a 2-week solo traverse of a remote section of the range that saw a few visitors. Ashworth was experienced, well-equipped, and meticulous in his preparation. He carried the latest navigation and communication technology, including a satellite communicator that would transmit his position every 10 minutes throughout the trip. He also carried something unusual, a custom-built sensor package that he had commissioned from a technology company in Silicon Valley. The package included air quality monitors, electromagnetic field detectors, infrasound microphones, and a suite of other instruments designed to detect anomalies in the environment. Ashworth had become interested in reports of unusual phenomena in wilderness areas and wanted to collect data that might help explain them. His expedition was documented extensively. He had shared his plans with a network of friends and fellow wilderness enthusiasts. He had arranged for his satellite data to be monitored by a company that specialized in remote expedition support. He had filed detailed itineraries with the relevant land management agencies. Benjamin Ashworth entered the Sierra Nevada on August 3, 2023. His satellite communicator transmitted his position every 10 minutes as programmed. His support team monitored his progress in real time. For 11 days, everything proceeded normally. Ashworth covered ground at his expected pace. His position reports showed him following his planned route with minor deviations for terrain or weather. He sent text messages to friends commenting on the beauty of the landscape and the quality of the data his sensor package was collecting. On August 14th, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, the satellite communicator of Ashworth transmitted a position report from a location in a remote valley at approximately 9,000 feet elevation. The position was consistent with his planned route. 10 minutes later, the next scheduled transmission did not arrive. The support team waited. Sometimes satellite signals were delayed by terrain or atmospheric conditions. They expected the next transmission to arrive within minutes. It did not. An hour passed, then 2, then 6. By evening, it was clear that something had gone wrong. The support team contacted search and rescue authorities. The search for Benjamin Ashworth began the following morning. The search that followed was extraordinary in its scope and technology. Because Ashworth had been transmitting his position every 10 minutes, searchers knew exactly where he had been at 2:15 on August 14th. They knew his precise route for the previous 11 days. They knew his speed, his rest stops, his deviations from the planned path. They had more data about this missing person than perhaps any missing person in history. The initial search area was small, a radius of approximately 1 mile from the last known position, representing the maximum distance Ashworth could have traveled in the 10 minutes between his last transmission and when the next transmission should have occurred. Helicopters with thermal imaging were over the area within 4 hours of the alert. They detected nothing. Drones were deployed the following morning, covering the search area in systematic grids with high-resolution cameras. They photographed every square meter of terrain. Analysis software examined every image for any sign of a human presence. Nothing. Ground teams reached the last known position on day 2. They found the trail of Ashworth easily, his footprints visible in soft soil leading into the valley. They followed the trail for approximately 300 yards beyond the last transmitted position. Then the trail ended. There were no more footprints, No more broken vegetation. No more signs of human passage. Benjamin Ashworth had walked into the valley, and then, as far as the physical evidence indicated, ceased to exist. The search expanded. More helicopters, more drones, dogs trained in both air scent and trailing, ground-penetrating radar to check for buried objects or bodies. Satellite imagery analyzed by AI systems trained to detect human presence in wilderness terrain. The technology deployed represented the cutting edge of search capability. The budget was essentially unlimited, funded partly by the land management agencies and partly by the substantial estate of Ashworth. The search continued for 47 days. It covered more than 200 square miles. It generated terabytes of data. It involved more than 500 personnel from multiple agencies. Benjamin Ashworth was not found. His body was not found. His equipment was not found. His pack, his sensor array, his satellite communicator, his clothing. Nothing was found. The only evidence of his presence in the valley was the trail that ended 300 yards beyond his last transmission. The official report on the Ashworth search runs to more than 300 pages. It documents every asset deployed, every area searched, every piece of data analyzed. It acknowledges that the search was conducted according to best practices and that no procedural errors were identified. The report does not explain what happened to Benjamin Ashworth. Several unofficial theories have circulated within the search and rescue community. The first theory proposes that Ashworth encountered a catastrophic geological event, such as a sudden sinkhole or collapse, that buried him completely. However, ground-penetrating radar found no evidence of disturbed soil or subsurface voids in the search area. The second theory suggests that Ashworth was attacked by a large predator, such as a mountain lion, and his remains were scattered or consumed. However, no blood, no torn equipment, and no other evidence of animal attack was found. The third theory proposes that Ashworth staged his disappearance deliberately, abandoning his technology and hiking out by a different route. However, extensive investigation found no evidence that Ashworth had any reason to disappear, and his financial accounts showed no activity after August 14th. The fourth theory, discussed quietly among searchers who worked the case, acknowledges that the evidence does not support any conventional explanation. "That valley has a reputation," said one searcher who requested anonymity. "People have reported strange things there for decades. Equipment malfunctions, disorientation, sounds that do not have obvious sources." The searcher paused. "I am not saying anything definite. I am saying that Benjamin Ashworth walked into a valley with a reputation for strangeness, carrying equipment specifically designed to detect anomalies, and vanished without a trace. The technology that was supposed to track his every move stopped working at the exact moment something happened to him. The technology that was supposed to find him found nothing. Maybe there is a mundane explanation. Maybe he fell into a crevice we did not detect. Maybe an animal took him and we missed the evidence. Or maybe there are things in this wilderness that we do not understand, and our technology is as blind to them as we are. The case of Benjamin Ashworth remains open. His estate has established a fund to continue the search and to support research into unusual phenomena in wilderness areas. The sensor data he collected during his 11 days of hiking has been analyzed by multiple researchers, though the results of that analysis have not been made public. His satellite communicator, with its record of positions transmitted every 10 minutes for 11 days, tells us exactly where Benjamin Ashworth was until 2:15 on August 14th, 2023. It does not tell us where he went after that. It does not tell us why his trail ended 300 yards into a valley from which he never emerged. It does not tell us what happened in the 10 minutes between his last transmission and when he should have transmitted again. The technology recorded everything it was designed to record. It was not enough. The cases documented in this investigation share a common thread: technology that performed exactly as designed, but could not achieve the outcomes we expected. Thermal cameras that did not detect bodies, GPS devices that led hikers into danger, communication systems that could not coordinate rescues, search operations that deployed every available tool, and still failed. These failures are not primarily technological. The machines work, the sensors detect, the algorithms calculate. The failures occur in the gap between technological capability and the reality of wilderness environments, in the assumptions built into our systems, and in our own tendency to trust machines more than they deserve. The lessons are clear but uncomfortable. Technology is a tool, not a solution. The most sophisticated search equipment in the world cannot find someone who is shielded from detection by terrain, vegetation, or factors we do not understand. Deploying more technology does not necessarily improve outcomes. Sometimes it creates false confidence that degrades the quality of human search effort. Algorithms encode assumptions that may not match reality. GPS routing algorithms assume all terrain is passable. Search algorithms assume lost people behave in predictable ways. Communication systems assume that data will be transmitted accurately through multiple handoffs. When these assumptions fail, the technology becomes worse than useless. It becomes actively misleading. Human judgment remains irreplaceable. The searchers who found Gerald Hoffman and the hiker in Olympic National Forest did so by ignoring technological guidance and following their instincts. The volunteers and professionals who succeed in the hard cases are those who maintain their own judgment even when the machines say something different. Some environments resist technological solutions. The cases clustered in certain areas, the reports of equipment malfunctions and searcher disorientation, the disappearances that defy every conventional explanation. These patterns suggest that our understanding of wilderness environments is incomplete. Technology designed for ordinary conditions may not function reliably in extraordinary ones. The wilderness remains wild. We have mapped it from satellites, photographed it from drones, modeled it in computers. We have built machines that can detect heat signatures through forest canopy and track positions to within 3 meters anywhere on Earth. And still, people vanish. Still, bodies go unfound. Still, the wilderness keeps secrets that no technology has penetrated. This is not an argument against technology. It is an argument for humility. The machines have extended our capabilities enormously. They have saved countless lives. They will continue to improve, and those improvements will save more lives in the future. But they will not conquer the wilderness. They will not eliminate mystery. They will not make the wild places safe. If you venture into the backcountry, carry the technology, use the GPS, bring the satellite communicator, file your itinerary, and establish your check-in protocols. But also trust your instincts. Learn to read terrain with your own eyes. Develop the judgment that comes only from experience. Do not follow a machine into a canyon that your gut tells you is wrong. The technology will help you when it can, but when it cannot, you will have only yourself. Nathan Okoye carried more location technology than most search teams possess. He was found dead 200 yards from a trail. Veronica Sandoval documented her journey in real time for hundreds of thousands of followers. She has never been found. Raymond Kessler followed a GPS route that no human guide would have recommended. He died in a canyon called the Box of Death. Keiko Watanabe had 4 separate ways to communicate her position. She spent 55 hours trying to make someone understand where she was. Gerald Hoffman lay 150 yards from a trail for 10 days, while thermal cameras and drones and dogs passed by without finding him. Benjamin Ashworth transmitted his position every 10 minutes until 2:15 in the afternoon, and then walked into a valley and vanished from the face of the earth. The machines recorded their journeys. The machines tracked their positions. The machines analyzed the data and coordinated the searches. The machines did not save them. Some were found alive, rescued by human intuition that overrode technological guidance. Some were found dead, despite searches that should have succeeded. Some were never found at all, their fates unknown, their disappearances unexplained. Technology extends our reach. It does not guarantee our safety. The wilderness does not care how sophisticated our tools have become. And when the machines fail, the wilderness will be waiting. This is the truth that searchers know, that survivors know, that the families of the missing know. Technology is powerful. The wilderness is more powerful still. Respect both. Trust neither completely, and never forget that the most important technology you carry into the backcountry is your own mind, your own judgment, your own will to survive. The machines are tools. You are the one who must use them wisely. You are the one who must recognize when they are failing. You are the one who must find your way home. There is a final perspective that deserves consideration. The view from inside the technology industry itself. We spoke with Dr. Amanda Chen, a former engineer at a major GPS device manufacturer who now consults on outdoor safety technology. She spent 8 years designing the algorithms that power wilderness navigation devices and has become increasingly concerned about how those devices are used. We built these systems for specific purposes, Dr. Chen explained. GPS navigation was designed to help people follow known routes, not to create new routes through unknown terrain. The routing algorithms were optimized for roads and established trails, then adapted for off-trail use without fully understanding the implications. Dr. Chen described the pressure within the industry to add features that sound impressive in marketing materials, but may create risks in practice. Every generation of devices has to do more than the previous generation, she said. More features, more capabilities, more intelligence. But more is not always better in wilderness navigation. Sometimes simpler is safer. A device that shows you where you are, and nothing else might be better than a device that suggests routes, estimates travel times, and creates an illusion of expertise. She pointed to the cross-country routing feature that led Raymond Kessler into Caja del Muerte. That feature was added because competitors had it. Marketing wanted it. Users requested it. But no one fully considered what happens when the algorithm suggests a route through terrain that looks passable on a topographic map, but is actually deadly. The algorithm does not know what it does not know. It cannot distinguish between a gentle valley and a slot canyon. It treats all terrain within certain slope parameters as equivalent. Dr. Chen has advocated for what she calls conservative design, building devices that err on the side of caution, that warn users when suggested routes cross potentially dangerous terrain, that acknowledge their limitations rather than projecting false confidence. Her advocacy has met resistance within the industry. Companies want to sell capability, she said. They want users to feel empowered, not cautious. A device that constantly warns you about potential dangers feels less capable than a device that confidently suggests routes, even if the cautious device is actually safer. The technology industry has not fully reckoned with the deaths that their devices have contributed to. Liability protections and user agreements shift responsibility to the individuals who use the devices. When someone dies following a GPS route into dangerous terrain, the legal framework treats this as user error, not design failure. Dr. Chen disagrees with this framing. We designed these systems, she said. We wrote the algorithms. We chose what data to include and what warnings to omit. When someone trusts our device and dies because of that trust, we bear some responsibility. Not all of it, but some. She has proposed industry standards for wilderness navigation devices, mandatory warnings when routes cross unmapped terrain, limitations on cross-country routing suggestions, clear communication of the assumptions embedded in algorithms. These proposals have not been adopted. The market does not reward caution, Dr. Chen said. It rewards capability. Until that changes, devices will continue to project confidence they do not deserve, and people will continue to trust them into dangerous situations. The families of the missing have organized to push for change. The Ashworth Foundation, established after the disappearance of Benjamin Ashworth, funds research into search technology limitations and advocates for improved coordination between device manufacturers and search and rescue organizations. The foundation has commissioned studies on GPS accuracy in remote terrain, on communication system interoperability, and on the psychological factors that lead people to trust technology over their own judgment. Similar organizations have emerged around other high-profile disappearances. The Kessler Memorial Fund provides training materials on GPS limitations to outdoor education programs. The Watanabe Initiative works to improve 9/11 dispatcher training on GPS coordinate handling. These efforts are valuable but limited. They operate at the margins of an industry that generates billions of dollars annually and that has little financial incentive to acknowledge the limitations of its products. Change will require either catastrophic failure significant enough to generate regulatory attention or a cultural shift in how wilderness users relate to technology. Neither seems imminent. In the meantime, the burden falls on individuals, on hikers and backpackers who must learn to evaluate the guidance their devices provide, on search and rescue volunteers who must maintain their judgment, even when algorithms suggest otherwise, on families who must advocate aggressively when their loved ones go missing and the technology that should help find them fails. The technology will continue to improve. Future devices will have better sensors, better algorithms, better integration with emergency response systems. Drones will become more capable. Artificial intelligence will become more sophisticated. The gaps that allow people to vanish may narrow, but they will not close entirely. The wilderness is vast. The terrain is complex. The factors that determine whether a person is found or lost include variables that no sensor has yet measured, that no algorithm has yet modeled, that no artificial intelligence has yet understood. There will always be cases like Benjamin Ashworth, where the technology works perfectly and the person vanishes anyway. There will always be places where the instruments behave strangely and the search dogs lose the trail, and the volunteers report feeling something they cannot name. The technology extends our reach into the wilderness. It does not give us dominion over it. This is the lesson of every case we have examined. The machines are powerful, but not omnipotent. The algorithms are sophisticated, but not wise. The sensors detect what they are designed to detect, and nothing more. Trust the technology to do what it can. Do not trust it to do what it cannot. And never forget that when you walk into the wilderness, you are entering a world that existed for millions of years, before the first circuit was soldered, the first satellite was launched, the first algorithm was written. The wilderness remembers a time before technology. It will remember a time after. We are visitors in a place that does not belong to us. The machines are our tools, not our masters. And the most important technology we carry is still the one we were born with: the ability to think, to judge, to adapt, to survive. Use the machines, but trust yourself. The investigation is complete. The questions remain. And somewhere in the wilderness, the next person who trusts technology more than they should is preparing for a journey they may not survive. Learn from those who came before. The machines cannot save you. Only you can save yourself. The wilderness awaits. Choose wisely what you carry into it, and may you return to tell your own story.